Hi, my name is Kim Vesey, and I'm going to share my journey of navigating grief on the path to finding hope.
Welcome to the Redirect Podcast, where we explore what comes after career. Real conversations about transitioning from the 9-to-5 grind to your next great adventure. Whether you're heading into retirement or simply redefining what purpose means, we're here to inspire, inform, and help you reimagine what's next. This isn't the end of the road. It's the start of something new. Hey guys, we're going to have another great conversation today like we always do. We're so blessed to have such great guests to come in and talk about certain stories for us. But before we get involved with our conversation with our guest today, Kim Vesey, I'm curious to know how you deal with or manage grief.
Well, it's a great question. It's always a scary question because we really don't want to do it. But my first real opportunity to manage grief was when Fran and I got married. She lost her mom. I think it's just about 1 year into our marriage, which was right after the birth of our first son. And she was out on the West Coast. Her mom was on the West Coast. We were in Cincinnati. But she was able to get out there and have this moment with her before she left. And still talks about what a great day it was because her mom could eat ice cream and nothing mattered. She could smoke, she could drink, she could do all that because nothing was going to impact. She was going to die soon and she knew it. And they just had this great conversation. Fran came back and then she died. But the hook was 4 months later, her dad died just of a broken heart. He was traveling and he was in another foreign country. And then all of a sudden me, without having to deal with anybody that close, I'm watching my new bride suffer through loss of parents and becoming an orphan, just like that. And the first thing Fran did was she went and found a grief counselor. She had Fran do something that I find was really unique. She had Fran set up a place in our house that was all about her mom. And every day she had to stop by and talk to her mom and kind of deal with it, but embrace it as an opportunity to celebrate the joy of her life. But what was really happening was you got to face this, you got to deal with this, move on. And that was first, and there were a lot of other kind of things that Fran did with her grief counselor. But as I was talking to Fran, I was going, you remember? She goes, gosh, I'm not sure you even remember that. But she said, but your dad died and your best friend died. I showed up just after my dad died. I mean, I was the one that found my dad dead. He had just died probably a minute before I raced home. Somebody said, it's getting close to get here. I got there. My brother was there. He came up to me and says, I'm not sure he's breathing. We went in there and found him. And then all of a sudden I went into this peaceful moment of, Dad, wow, you're with God now. And it was almost this joyful moment. But then the hard things happen later when you got to deal with, this stuff we used to do together. We used to talk about indie movies and everything, and it comes back. I don't know. Do I have a formula for managing grief? No, it's for me, it was one day at a time. I compartmentalize things and I'll try to get the stuff done that needs to be done. And I know I'm going to feel about it later, but for me, it's really being there for people and celebrating the joy of a life well lived.
For me, my mom will have passed 10 years ago, later this year. In the past 10 years, I've lost my mom, my father-in-law, a sister, and 2 brothers. And I think I'm a little better equipped now than I was, a bunch of years ago. I've come to realize I think grief is a process, and however you get to go through it, and the goal isn't to get past it. I don't think for me. I've come to learn that all emotions are realistically they're God-given. I was created with the capacity for anger. I was created with the capacity for sadness, and when I find myself in a situation where sadness is an appropriate emotion, don't run from it. Don't run from negative emotions. Feel them. Sit in them. Experience the sadness if that's what I'm experiencing. So I think I've learned to embrace emotions as God created me to experience emotions. And if I'm angry or sad or relieved or joyful, let those things be and experience them intentionally. And as it relates to grief and loss, I think we avoid those negative emotions, and sometimes it leads us to a place where we don't process those things in a healthy way. And so accepting grief as not an emotion or an event, it's a process, and letting myself go through that. Like one of my siblings I was rather close to. My other one, not so much. I've only seen him a couple of times in my life. So, I experienced two different things in that. So, that's my take on, or my experience with grief.
Yeah, grief to me is all parts of our life. We have different things that sort of instill behavior in us. And I consider myself an emotional person. I'm sensitive. I can watch a movie. I have no problem tearing up and all that kind of stuff. I think of things and I'll have a tear in my eye. But when I was younger and my grandfather on my dad's side passed away, I came into the viewing later than everybody else, and I just got in town, and my dad brought me in, and I lost it. I just sobbing uncontrollably, and everybody else, as a result of me sobbing, was sobbing uncontrollably. And my father pulled me aside and said, "Curt, we went into a private room and said, get yourself together, brother. You're really sort of creating an environment for everybody else that could be a little challenging." And from that point forward, I sort of learned to just suck it up and hold it. How I handle it, I had a brother-in-law that passed away tragically. That hit me really hard. I didn't get into the tears openly. It's quiet tears. But then I got outside and I split wood like there was no tomorrow. I cut wood for 2 days straight, from like 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, just swinging an axe. And it's not anger. It's just release. I just had to let it go. And there were moments of crying. There was moments of just exhaustion, but I just kept going. When people pass today, for me, friends, family, or even people I don't know, I do like, it sounds weird, I do like to go to funerals. I want to hear the story of the person. I want to see the family and hear their love for the lost one. And that is a beautiful thing to me. But knowing where my heart is and where I am, and I know where I'm going, it's one of these topics, guys, like we do on this podcast, is we talk about things that are uncomfortable. But there's some beautiful things that come out of the stories that we're going to hear from our guest today. So, Dale, why don't you...
Well, and there's no getting out of it, right? We're not getting out of this thing alive.
100% chance.
and
death is undefeated.
As always, we're not the experts.
Exactly.
Not by a bit, but we brought an expert in today. So today's friend of the Redirect podcast is Kim Vesey. Kim is an award-winning author, certified grief specialist, and a seasoned palliative care nurse who has dedicated 40-plus years of her career to serving in the hospice and grief industry. In 1985, she began providing in-home care for patients who were nearing the end of their life. Kim cared for and felt privileged to have companioned over 1,500 patients through end-of-life transitions. She's been at the bedside of over 150 patients at the moment of their deaths. In Kim's words, a very sacred time, a precious time, a true privilege, a privilege that has changed her and brought her incredible understanding and insight. In 2015, Kim was featured guest speaker at 10X Dayton, where she delivered a message entitled First Breath, Final Breath. Kim served as an in-home hospice nurse for 12 years before starting a path in leadership, culminating as the executive director of Ohio's Hospice of Dayton until 2023, when she decided to retire at the age of 63 from her hospice career to pursue a personal divine calling. The following year, Kim embarked on her next chapter as founder of My Hope Path, in which she extends her expertise and compassion to individuals, employers, churches, schools, funeral homes, military units, OBGYN, NICU facilities, and communities across the United States. Her mission and passion revolve around aiding and guiding those navigating grief toward a path of hope. So, Kim, welcome to the Redirect Podcast.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be here with all of you.
So I want to ask the question, palliative care. Wow, you got into this at a really early age. Tell us this story.
Well, I went into nursing school. I always knew I wanted to be a nurse, so that wasn't a question. But when I was finishing up my education, I kept wondering what type of nursing I wanted to pursue. And we had a nurse come in and speak to our class, and she was a hospice nurse. And as soon as I heard her story, I go, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be.
So what was her story? What was that spark of something she said that you said, wow, that's for me?
She talked about the incredible gift of companioning people at the end of life and people letting you in at that most intimate time in their life, most difficult time in their life, and having the privilege to be there with them and help them and try to ease it a little bit for both the patient and the family, by providing education and symptom management and such. And she also spoke about how it had impacted her life and changed her. That sounded great. I had no idea how much it would impact me and change my life.
So what are the services that hospice provides?
Hospice, by regulation, has to provide an interdisciplinary team of nurses, social workers, chaplains, home health aides to assist with personal care, volunteers, bereavement staff, physician. And then we have pharmacy available, as well as therapies like physical therapy, occupational therapy, et cetera. And those team members visit patients predominantly in their homes or assisted living or nursing homes to, again, companion them, make sure their symptoms are managed as well as possible, to have the hard conversations, talking about the things that are hard to bring up, talk about funeral planning, talk about, a good goodbye, right? How do you say what do you need to say, what you need to say to have a good end of life, right? For both the patient and then the family that goes on afterwards. Right?
Yeah, that was the nature of my question is how much of your energy and effort in those environments goes to caring for the person who's, in their final moments and the family who are along your side or along their side? How does that division of energy work?
Really every situation's different, but it's both. It's very much both of those things. So, making sure the patient is as comfortable as they want to be, right? Because some people say, I don't want medication, I don't want to be sedated, and they choose to have maybe more difficult symptoms, but they want to be alert. Some patients say, I don't want to suffer, and it's okay if I'm sleepy or if I don't wake up, and I'm sedated from medication. So we navigate that with them, and we try to keep them as comfortable as possible. And then we educate the family on what's next, what's the most likely thing to occur next, and to try to anticipate those needs so we can have the medication or equipment in the home that they're going to need to transition through that without it being any more stressful than it has to be. We're also talking about symptoms, what to do for those symptoms. Maybe it's congestion or difficulty breathing or change in the appearance of the skin. It gets a blotchy blue, so they're not fearful, right? Mm-hmm. And then talking about just saying what's on your heart, right? Talking to them honestly, if they're open to it. Some people just aren't. Mm-hmm. And we're going to keep talking about getting better and such. And we've always got to respect folks, where they're at.
But do you get into faith questions?
Sometimes patients will bring it up. I had many patients who asked me, do you think there's a heaven? And I would always tell them my Vivian story. Vivian was an amazing patient I took care of for about 2 years. She and her husband had no children. They weren't able to have kids. And so she was dying in our inpatient unit, and I stopped by to see her. He was sitting on one side of the bed holding her hand, and I was sitting on the other side. And we were talking back and forth, sharing Vivian's stories. And all of a sudden, the room became incredibly bright. like LED light bright, right?
Oh.
And the sun hadn't just come out. No one turned a light on. And I looked at Vivian, and her face was radiating this brilliant white light. And this woman who'd been unresponsive for about 3 days lifted her head off her pillow and said, "I've seen heaven, and it's beautiful."
Wow.
And she laid her head down, and she died.
Wow.
And so when someone says, "Do you believe there's a heaven?" Because even people who've believed all their life in that moment, when they're about to pass, they want to be sure, right? They want reassurance. And so I would tell the Vivian story because I believe there's a heaven, right?
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I've had experience with hospice, not myself, obviously, but my mom and dad both went through the hospice service, and my brother was very involved in supporting the Buffalo division of hospice through fundraising and such. So I want to say thank you to you and all those that are in hospice care, because the services you provide, you're so knowledgeable. You understand the process well. You're very focused on the patient, but you're also there for me. At least the people that worked with us.
Absolutely.
And what was so blessed for us is that we had the same hospice nurse for my dad as well as my mom that was 14 months apart. And it was so nice to see her again. And she knew us.
Right.
And it was such a great service that I knew my parents were comfortable as best as they could be. And she was helpful to the family. So thank you for what you do. And we're not ending the podcast, but I just want to say,
keep listening.
I just want to say thank you for the service. And I don't know if you guys have experienced a hospice, experience within your own families.
Never. When my dad died, and I mentioned it earlier, we had him at home in the living room on a hospital bed, and my mom was still alive, and they were there together. So I've not. How about you?
I haven't, but I think it takes a special person. It's just a different approach to life, a different view of dealing with people. And I'm grateful to be sitting here with you. I think the care, the compassion, the empathy that it takes to choose a profession like that and to be fulfilled by it and willfully engage in that year over year. I think society owes your profession a debt, and I'm grateful to hear more about your story.
How has it impacted you?
It has taught me how to be with someone who's dying, right? The more I did the work, the more I learned about open communication. I saw families that didn't want to talk about it. I saw families that didn't say the C word, right? Don't say cancer, or don't say the H word. Don't tell them you're from hospice. Just say you're a nurse. And we'll be respectful of that as long as the patient doesn't ask specific questions.
You're going to tell the truth.
Because then, yes, absolutely, we tell the truth. But it's hard. I had a patient once who was paralyzed from the waist down because her breast cancer had spread into her bones. And it had severed the spine, so she couldn't walk. And one day she asked me, will I ever walk again? And I looked at her husband because Frank had said, "You cannot tell her she's got cancer. You cannot talk about it." So I looked at him and he shook his head no. And I said, "Mary, you know what? I need to go. I have another, place I need to be. But next week when I come back, we're going to pick up this conversation, okay?" And I looked at Frank and I said, "Follow me." Right?
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
We got out to the car and I said, "Look, if you let me come back in next week, I'm going to answer her question." And he was reluctant, but he finally, said, "Okay, you can come back."
But there's an example that you're using the patient's question in order to help that person in that moment of time who was her husband at the time.
Yeah, you're not only companioning the one passing, you're companioning the folks involved.
He was probably accepting it himself to a degree.
Yeah, and what came from that was I did tell her the next time, and her exact response was, "That's what I thought, but nobody would tell me," right? And she only lived about 3 weeks after that. But she and Frank, their relationship changed those last 3 weeks, and it was beautiful to watch.
What's the most frustrating part of being in hospice?
Wow.
Or challenging hard part of the job?
That's one hard part, right? When family and the patient aren't on the same page, right? Sometimes you're in with the patient by themselves
Yeah.
and they're telling you, I'm so tired. I don't want to do any more treatment. I'm weary.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to go home to
Yeah.
God, right? And the family's saying, he's got to keep fighting. He's got to keep fighting.
Oh.
And you're trying to navigate that and bring them together so you can have honest conversation. I think another frustrating part is when you're doing everything you can to get somebody comfortable and it's just not working yet. And watching somebody suffer at the end of life, that just hurts my heart. And then you all spoke about hospice workers and, how they navigate this very difficult path. And, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to the individual who's doing the work because you're putting your heart and soul into it. And trust me, there were many times my kids were little. I mean, I had both my kids after I started hospice, right? So they watched me, they grew up with end of life stuff. They saw me come home from work and they'd say, did you have a patient die today? You seem sad. Yeah, I'm going to go in the bedroom for just a little bit and then I'll be back. And, and I'd go in there and, maybe have a good cry or whatever. And then I'd come out and it'd be okay. But they learned about funerals and they learned about death through my work. And they saw that it was a normal part of life. But there was also times it took me away from my family. And so there's a personal cost to this job. So kudos to the families of hospice workers too.
Wow.
Who are often, you're getting called away to go to, see a patient in the middle of a family picnic or, something. I mean, it just depends. You do call on weekends and holidays and, it's not just an 8 to 5 job Monday through Friday.
What process do you go through to protect yourself, your emotions, your perspective?
Well, I prayed a lot as I went through my day. I really did. I just prayed that I could bring whatever this patient and family needed and that God would be with me and be with them. And then I also tried to debrief before I'd go home at the end of the day, like really reflect on my day and what went well and what didn't. And how was I feeling deep down in my soul? How was I feeling? And there were times it got really hard. Matter of fact, that's what prompted me to leave the bedside. Initially, I thought I'd be for a short period of time to get into some leadership because my heart needed a break. My kids, I was raising my children and they were probably at that point about 6 and 8, and it was busy and I was tired and I felt like I was beginning to be robotic with my patients and families. Like, right, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And the next patient, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And I thought, they deserve better. I need to just rest for a little bit from this part of it. Once I got into leadership, though, I realized that I could impact more patients and families by impacting staff and helping to educate them and motivate them and inspire them and caring
to
for
help
their
them
patients.
through the tough times,
Right.
Because you've been there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, while I did intend to go back initially into patient care after a brief respite, I ultimately never did. But, and I miss it still to this day. I miss it. But yeah, that's another hard piece is, that you do give part of yourself away to that and your family allows that to happen.
Is there a way outside of donating? And if people want to, donate to a local hospice organization, it's a very worthwhile donation because of the money and where it's going and how it's helping the people that are calling on these patients and just the process itself. Are there other ways that someone who may have a heart to just be with people as they go to volunteer, or do you have to, you can't really volunteer for it because it's such a specialized thing?
No, absolutely. We have lots of volunteers, and many times our volunteers come to us after having had a hospice experience. Someone they loved died with hospice care, and we usually say wait at least a year, kind of get through your grief process, and then, come in and you can volunteer. And some folks volunteer with patients at the bedside, right? Sitting with them in their home or offering a hand massage, visiting pets. We have pet therapy. So people will bring pets to patients' bedsides. Sometimes they go and just read to a patient or help a patient write notes to somebody, videotape their story for their family.
Wow.
And then there's lots of other ways to volunteer that doesn't require contact with patients, administrative volunteers, right? Making copies of things and filing and, doing mailings for the foundation and working at fundraising events. So there is
helping the
something
cause,
for
but not on the front
everybody.
line.
Right.
Yeah.
There's something
Well,
for everyone.
I've got to throw in that my wife actually is part of a small horse association that goes out and visits hospice care facilities with these mini horses.
Oh, yes, I've seen
And the
that.
stories that she comes back with, they're just things that just touch the heart of people when you're able to be a part or bring some service to the hospice would be. Yeah, she loves it. The stories are great.
It's amazing when you have a patient who is weary and dealing with lots of symptoms on medication, and someone brings a dog or a small horse. I've seen llamas come in. They spit, warning. They spit.
But, wearing a mask.
yes. But to watch their eyes light up and them smile,
right.
And to know you brought them a moment, even if it's just for a moment of joy.
Yeah.
So, Kim, we've tapped on your professional side, your career and being involved with hospice, and we've sort of shared a little bit about ourselves and having, some type of hospice involvement. Have you had hospice care on a personal nature for you?
My answer would be, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
It was a blessing to have it, but I don't think anyone sets out looking at the future hoping that you're going to have a hospice experience, right? In 2005, my husband, 49-year-old husband, Les, was diagnosed with metastatic colon cancer. He'd been very healthy all his life, no family history, was simply fatigued, and that was unusual for him. And so I, as a good wife, started nagging him. You need to go to the doctor, right? Get it, and if you get a chest X-ray and a colonoscopy and it's all good, you can take naps every day. I don't care, right? So he did go to the doctor, and chest X-ray was fine. Scheduled him for the colonoscopy, and they found the colon cancer. So within a couple of days, he had surgery, and that's when they discovered it was in his liver as well. And the prognosis was poor. Our kids were 17 and 19, and it's interesting when you look back, the day he told our children, the four of us were sitting there, and he said to our daughter, who was a senior in high school, this was in October, and don't worry, I'll be there for your graduation on June 3rd. I'm not sure why that popped into his head, but that's what came out. And that became his focus, his promise. And so once we found out how extensive his disease was, and the likelihood was he was not going to live till June 3rd, because he did not respond well to the surgery and did not tolerate the treatment well either. So we started hospice in February of 2006, and we only had hospice for a couple weeks. He told him that he'd promised Sarah that he'd be there for her graduation. And so they quickly went to work behind the scenes, worked with the school district, set up a graduation ceremony for our daughter.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. So there was about 50 people in the room, friends and family, and talk about divine intervention.
I did not expect to cry here.
I have tissues. I always have tissues. No, but the school said, well, we only have one cap and gown here. This time of year, it was February. And so they said, but we'll modify it to fit Sarah, and she can wear that. Great. Well, the day before, and this was only like a 3-day period where this came together, the truck pulled in like a month early to drop off the graduation gowns, caps and gowns for that year. And it happened to be after school. So the teachers that were still there, the custodians, everyone goes out to the truck to find Sarah's cap and gown.
Wow.
And they found it. And the next day she had it on, and they played Pomp and Circumstance as she walked in, and Les was there on a gurney with oxygen, and Patrick and I were standing next to him.
This was done at the school?
It was actually done at a church down the street from our home.
Okay.
But hospice arranged for an ambulance to take him down there because we couldn't get him down there at that point. And she came in, and the superintendent bestowed upon her diploma, and she pumped her arm, like we made it, and went straight to her dad and kissed him. And that's what she said. We made it, Dad. Knowing that he had kept his promise to her and she to him. And it was a beautiful moment. It really was a beautiful gift to all of us. And then 2 weeks later, he died in our home with Patrick holding one hand, Sarah holding one hand, his head was in my arm. And I could tell by the way his breathing changed. I said to the kids, guys, he's going now. And we each just told him, how much we loved him. And he passed quietly in our home, which is exactly what he wanted. So,
do you find in those moments, though, there's this professional Kim and this emotional Kim?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Someone said to me, it must have been a lot easier since you've done hospice.
Oh, wow.
And I said, only from the neck up.
Yeah.
Right. I had the knowledge, right? I knew what to watch for. I knew what to anticipate. I knew what to ask for. From the neck down, my heart broke as much as anybody else's, right? He was the love of my life. We planned to grow old together. So, it kind of helped with the knowledge, but it didn't change what was happening in my heart and soul.
Did that change for you then, going personally through it? Did it change anything about how you handled what you were going to do going forward?
Patient care.
Absolutely. Yeah. It changed a lot of things. I knew the intellectual part, being a certified hospice nurse.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the physical symptoms of grief, the emotional symptoms, the spiritual changes and symptoms that happen. And I could articulate them to my surviving family members when I'd visit with them after the death. But to go through it, to know what it means when we said you might feel shortness of breath after your loved one dies as a symptom of grief. And it was about 2 months after my husband died. One morning I got up and I took a deep breath and I thought, oh my gosh, I can breathe.
Wow.
For 2 months, like I couldn't take a deep breath and I hadn't even realized it. It was like a heaviness in my chest, but like I could breathe, right? And then the crazy things people say, only because they don't know what to say.
Right.
And they've heard someone else say, God never gives you more than you can handle. Well, that's not really helpful because I'm not handling this very well.
Yeah,
so that means I'm
right.
probably letting God down, right? Or God needed another angel. When my daughter died, Sarah died in 2017 from an asthma attack.
My gosh, how old was she when she passed?
She was 29. She
oh my goodness.
had her birthday in the ICU, and she was there for 22 days, and she had an anoxic brain injury. So the squad came. We knew what to do. I'm grateful I was there because I know we did everything we could. She'd had asthma all her life. And when the squad came, she was conscious, but she lost consciousness and went into cardiac arrest in the ambulance and ultimately suffered an anoxic brain injury. So with Sarah, at the visitation, people said things like, God needed another angel. Well, that wasn't helpful because I have no doubt that less than Sarah in heaven and like enjoying the glory of the kingdom of God, right? That's not a doubt at all in my mind. But the bottom line is I needed them here. That's where my sadness was. My sadness wasn't about where they're at. My sadness was I wasn't ready to let go of them yet. And my daughter had a 3-year-old son. So watching him grieve, I learned a lot from my patients and families. It guided my husband's death experience, and it also helped me to say goodbye to my daughter. And subsequently, my dad and my mom have both passed, and my beloved little Yorkie dog that was my companion and support for 14 years. So it just brought it to life. It's like reading a book and then going and watching the movie. I mean, it's like you experience in a different way than when you just have the book or professional knowledge.
Time for a quick break. If you're liking what you're hearing, do us a quick favor. Hit that follow button, share it with your friends and family, drop us a quick comment, and then a 5-star review. It really helps us keep going and growing. Then head over to Instagram and follow us there too. Thanks for the help. And now let's get back to work. Has your experience, both professionally and personally, as you wandered into, if I can use that word, led yourself into retirement, what are you doing now? We heard in your bio you're an author. You've got some other irons in the fire. What are you doing?
Well, I started feeling God nudge me because after the TED Talk in 2015, I always enjoyed teaching and about end of life. And I was always comfortable having these difficult conversations because it's hard to stand in front of an audience of 50 to 100 or more people and talk about death and grief, because you never know what people are in the midst of in their own lives in the audience, and it can be difficult navigating that. So watching my grandson and his dad navigate the loss of my daughter, so the loss of her partner and mom, I saw that there was a need for just information and a pathway. Because let's face it, most folks don't know how to be with a child who is grieving, especially when they're grieving a parent, right?
Yeah, right.
So it was a matter of God nudging me to write these books. And I'm like, no, you've already asked a lot of me. I've been a hospice nurse all these years, right? I've lost my husband. I've lost my daughter. No, I'm not doing it. But, he can be really persistent. And I actually challenged him. And I learned no sense in challenging God. Okay, let me just put it out there if you're thinking about that.
I know where I place my bets.
Yes, no kidding. I was really kind of mad. I'm like, stop asking things of me, right? So I was getting ready to do a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and I said, fine, if this is of you and what you want for me, you prove it to me while I'm over in the Holy Land. And I thought, I got him, However, our beloved priest, Father Brinkmuller, led our group over there. And the night before we were at the Garden of Gethsemane, he asked me to do the homily the next day at the church that's built around the rock that Jesus is said to have knelt at. And sweat blood, right? And if you remember, he said, please let this cup pass by me, but ultimately your will be done. And I basically, and Father Dave knew this, prayed that for both my husband and my daughter before they died. And I did the homily the next day and shared that story. And about 2/3 of the group I didn't know prior to the trip, okay? So the remainder of the trip, I had 4 different people at different times throughout the rest of the trip approach me and say, this is going to sound strange, but for some reason, I really feel like I'm supposed to tell you that you need to write a children's book.
Out of nowhere, people you barely knew or didn't know.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
God won.
I'm like, fine.
Kim.
Fine, leave me alone. So I literally got home on a Thursday night, took Friday to recover from jet lag, and Saturday I got up and did the first draft, and I wrote it within a couple of hours. It was done, the first draft. So
So tell us about your books. Tell us.
The title of the first book is What Cloud Is My Mommy In? And that's because my grandson at 3.5 really didn't understand heaven, and people were telling him his mommy was in heaven and that it was a far place away, And so he said, well, where? And they said, it's in the clouds. Heaven's in the clouds. So we were out walking my little dog, and he's looking up in the sky. And I said, what are you doing, buddy? And he goes, Mama, what cloud is my mommy in? And so that became the title of the book, because it was simplistic and so childlike, right? So I wrote that book, and then I was sharing it with the Young Widows Support Group I lead, which is for widows under 50, and most of them, or many of them, have young children. I go, well, we need a daddy book, right?
Yeah.
So then daddy book came, and I got to thinking, well, grandpa loss is more common, so those followed. And those 4 books are basically the same, right? It's a story going through the whole first year of grief, ways to memorialize the person at Christmas and at Easter and Thanksgiving and on Mother's Day or Father's Day and their birthday and the child's birthday and such. But there's also information in the back of the book about, grief and how to grieve with your child together and how to be honest. Basically, any child old enough to love is old enough to grieve, right? Mm-hmm. So grief is a response of great love when it's lost. And so it's important that we help kids to process that. And so that was the first 4 books. Then I had a friend who had her second child, and the baby died a couple hours after birth. And so she had a son at home who was expecting a little sister, and she didn't come home.
Wow.
And so the brother-sister book was born, dealing with sibling loss in honor of my son who had lost his sister, and then also incorporating neonatal loss. So late-term miscarriage, stillbirth, NICU death, that sort of thing. So that book's about 3 turtles who go to grief camp. And 2 of them have memories of their sibling, but one doesn't because their sibling died at birth. And they navigate that together. And so, again, there's information in the back about the creating memories at holidays and such. But
I imagine these are pretty well received.
yeah, the feedback is it just warms my heart and brings tears to my eyes, really. I remember getting a message on, I think it's on Amazon, actually. She says, my kids hadn't smiled since their dad died. But as we went through the book and then started doing some of the things in the back of the book, we started laughing because we were telling stories and smiling. Mm-hmm. And we realized we can laugh and cry, because it talks about that in the book, at this, together. They're both part of grief, right?
Yeah.
They're both part.
That's what I love about this book. When you shared a copy with me a while back, I'm like, well, it's a kid's book. And then I started reading the introduction and the foreword. And then I went to the back where this, as you mentioned, all the life events and there's questions and answers. It's a guide for the parent. It's a guide for the adult to help with this situation. Congratulations. Nice effort. And I think it's a beautiful thing you're providing. Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, and the pet book just came out 2 weeks ago. So what cloud is my pet in?
Wow.
I was going to do
Does that mean dog, cat, fish?
Absolutely. Because I thought otherwise I had to do what cloud's my dog in and what cloud's my fish in. No.
Does that work across the board? It is pet, right?
It is pet.
My wife lost her horse.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll work.
Yeah, there's not a horse character in the book.
No.
But there's hermit crab characters and bearded dragons in there and cats and rabbits.
So how long have you been doing this project?
The first book, the mommy book, came out in 2019.
Okay.
Okay, and the pet one just came out 2 weeks ago. So they've kind of come out over those last 7 years. And then, my love for speaking and teaching and my certification in thanatology, which is the study of death and grief. I've got that certification predominantly so people understand it's not just me talking from my heart, but I have the knowledge base too, right? Based on my hospice work and also additional study that I've done in death and grief, knowledge about the physical things that happen, in grief and the emotional things and the spiritual things that happen that give me some credibility. So I also go out and do speaking to different groups. I've decided my life mission at this point is to change the way the world understands grief and how we companion or walk alongside those in our life who are grieving. And the best way I can do that is through education and storytelling. Because when I tell a story, as you guys have just been witness to, right? Yeah. When I tell a story and you can feel it, you remember it. And hopefully you can take that, and if at some point, and for most of us, it will be at some point, you can apply that maybe in your own personal lives when you're facing a loss.
So tell us about My Hope Path.
My Hope Path is the company I formed that is my speaking, business in the books. And I chose that name because grief, when you're in the midst of raw grief, it feels pretty hopeless, right? Mm. And through my loss experiences and my work, I've learned that you do eventually find your way back to hope. You do eventually experience joy and happiness again. Maybe not the way that I expected my life to be, but I have much joy in my life and much good in my life. So My Hope Path, it's because there's not just one path to hope. We each have our own path. And if you looked at the logo for the business, it's a cobblestone path. So it's winding, it's bumpy and uneven. At the end of the path, there's a big heart with a teardrop. Because again, when there's great love and it's lost, there's great sadness. There's some lavender along the path just because there's blessings along the way, right? Right? There's things that bring us comfort. And then there's also a cardinal and a butterfly because oftentimes we hear about those being symbolic of those that we've lost visiting us and reminding us that they're still here, in some way. I think the important message is that, when we lose someone that we love, they're physically gone from us, but the love remains. It changes. It's not the same as having them physically here, but you've always got that love that you carry in your heart and the memories that you'll have forever. And we hang on to those and embrace those until we can be together again on the other side.
What are some things that are maybe coming that you're starting to think about, you're getting nudged about? What's it look like?
After my husband died, I started writing a book. It's actually on 3-ring binder paper, right? Notebook paper, and written in pencil in a page protector.
Wow.
I started it.
Wow. It's a manuscript.
I get every one of those things.
I remember those.
I have those at home.
Okay, well, good. So we can relate. So I started it in 2007. And then I put it away. I don't know why. I guess I just got busy and I didn't really foresee myself ever really writing a book. But I've had so many people ask me to do that. You really need to write a book for adults. I mean, you've written books for kids, and I have adults who buy my books. So I'm working on that. And it's a little bit different format. I'm writing the book from the very beginning. What I'd already written, it was conversational. Grab a cup of coffee or tea and find a quiet spot, have a notebook and a pen, and let's have a chat, And each chapter is like 2 pages, 3 pages, because when you're grieving,
I get it.
You can't retain a lot, and you can't read a 40-page chapter, right?
Yeah.
But it's interactional. So, tell me about the person who died. Tell me what happened to them.
I hope that turns into an audiobook and you are the narrator. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, when is it coming out?
Yeah.
So thank you again for all the advice, and you've lived both sides, and you're doing something about it with your next chapter. If you could give advice to somebody that is having a difficult time grieving, what words would you say for them to get that awareness to say, it's okay?
First, to know whatever they're feeling, whatever it is, it's okay, as long as they're not thinking of hurting themselves, right? Anger, sadness, guilt, remorse, joy, right? Truly believe that whatever you're feeling, it's okay and it's real. And hopefully they can find someone in their life, a trusted friend or family member, and if not, professional counselor, spiritual director, whomever, to talk with about it, to look back and to share those stories. Because one of the most important things we can do as part of our grief work, because people say, well, what do I do with this, right? I have all this emotion and all this feeling. And that's to tell the story, to talk about it, to tell it over and over again. That's so important. So find ways to get the story out and talk about the person, keep their memory alive, because that's what moves us to the other side of grief. You will always carry grief with you. It doesn't just go away, but it softens. It softens. And sometimes the stories that in the beginning cause you to be sad, with time, it's the same stories that'll make you laugh or feel just great joy, because the pain of it, the sharp pain of that will diminish.
I even think that journaling would be a good thing if a person's not prepared to talk to somebody else about it. At least write your thoughts down so that when that time comes, you can say, here, read this and let's have a conversation. So that's great. And then one other thing on hospice. What advice would you give to people that are considering hospice, or what would you say to them about the hospice care component for a loved one?
Don't be afraid of it. The number one thing people tell us in our family satisfaction surveys is that I wish I would have done this sooner. I was so afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. You'll have someone to walk the path with you. I mean, hospice team members are available 24 hours a day. So at 3 a.m, if they're having pain, you can call hospice. If they're delirious, if they're having shortness of breath, if you're scared, you can call them and they'll come out.
Kim, if people want to get in touch with you, get some more information about My Hope Path or your books, how do people reach out to you?
Well, they can do that via my website, which is myhopepath.com, or they can email me at kim@myhopepath.com. The books are also available on Amazon and other book distributors online.
We'll put some links in the description of the podcast.
Perfect.
Well, Kim, I thank you very much for being here today, making the trip to the studio to hear your story. And what a story. I can't thank you enough, and the people in your industry, for what you provide to the patient, what you provide to the family, as I said earlier. And I also learned something else, that we shouldn't challenge God.
Yeah.
Amen.
I just want to thank you. You've stepped into an area that's a tough one for so many people, and you've given them a guide on how to get through it. I can't wait to read more of the books. I'm looking for the one on the horse. So when you get around to that one, let me know. But that's okay. But thank you so much. You know, I'm hoping that this gives relief for people to know that this is not a disaster. This is an opportunity.
It's another redirection.
It's another redirection, a whole redirection. Well put, Curt.
Yeah. Thanks for being a companion in those most intimate times in life. I think the world is a better place for people in your profession and people like you, and for you specifically.
There is one other thing I want to say. If you're with someone who is nearing the end of their life, take time to tell them what's on your heart. Don't miss that opportunity. Let them know you love them. Let them know the impact they've had on your life, the greatest things they've taught you, your most joyous experiences with them. Because we truly believe people can hear to the very end. You're sending them off with all that love and all that appreciation and joy. So many times when people are together at the end of life and they're watching the person take those spaced out breaths and everybody's just sitting in quiet and watching, talk about things like, what was your favorite family tradition at the holidays? And get the room talking about it. What was the favorite vacation you ever took? What was the funniest thing mom ever did? You know, and share those stories in the room because they're listening and they're hearing this. And man, I can't think of a better way to leave this earth than to feel the love of those that are nearest to me being shared.
And thanks for joining us on the Redirect Podcast.
We'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the 1819 Innovation Lab at the University of Cincinnati for their incredible support and partnership making this show possible. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find more of our content on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as Instagram. Have questions or want to connect? Drop us a line at info@redirect-u.com. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, there's purpose in your life, so find it and go do something about it.
Hey, I've got one more comment. The Redirect Podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We engage in an open, honest conversations about personal growth, life transitions, and the lessons we've learned through our own experiences. While we speak as experts in our own lives, we are not licensed therapists, medical professionals, or certified coaches. The content shared on the Redirect Podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of qualified professionals for any physical, mental, or emotional concerns that you may have. We're grateful to share this space with you and hope that our stories inspire reflection and connection. If you're in need of more support, we encourage you to connect with a trusted professional who can help.